Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys my Fear the Walking Dead Season 3, Episode 5 review. And before I do that, I want to give my letter grade for the last episode, Season 3, Episode 4, 100, because I forgot to. I'm going to give it a B+. Plus. It was a great episode. I'm not going to really go much into detail about it. You can check out that video in the playlist when I update it. But let's get right into this review. This episode is called Burden in Water, Drowning in Flame, which I kind of thought was a very fitting title for this episode. This episode um, aired on television, at least from what it says right here, on June 25th, 2017. And like I've talked about before with previous episodes, since there was multiple storylines that took place in this episode, I'll talk about them all at once. Um, just because the video will be sloppy if I don't do it that way. So I'll just kind of start off by talking about what went on with Daniel and Strand because they didn't have as big of a story as they did in the last episode. So essentially, Daniel and Strand are going back to the hotel to look for Ophelia, and they're just standing in the middle of the road waiting for the herd of infected to pass by because they don't want to. Strand doesn't want to damage the cone. If they shoot them, it would just attract more of them. But Daniels thinks that is suspicious that Strand is stalling because he doesn't think he's telling the truth um, about Ophelia being at the hotel, and he kind of starts to interrogate him, how, um, talking about how he'll ask Madison and Alicia when he gets back to the hotel, but eventually Strand eventually drives through the infected, and Strand stops to not Strand. Daniel stops to take a piss, and um, Strand asks him if he's still, and Strand also asks him why he left. Um, what's her name? I forget her name. Um, why he left Lola to go the dam by herself, and he says she can take care of herself right now. Ophelia needs me, and um, then Strand asks Daniel if he feels like he's the same person. No, how he ended up getting out of the Burning village, and Daniel says that God gave him a second chance because he doesn't have a place in heaven, and maybe it's the devil that's letting me live right now. And then Daniel and Strand go back and forth. You know, Strand's trying to talk Daniel out of going to the hotel, but Daniel still wants to go to the hotel. So um, was supposed to have. Strand then talks about how he's not the same person that saved Daniel and Ophelia um, when he brought him to Mexico. And Daniel says, "Good, because this type of world should change you." Kind of teasing like he's gonna kill him or something. So Strand just wants him to get it over with, but Daniel doesn't do it to kind of um, play psychological mind games with him. So Strand gets in the car and drives off. And when they get to the hotel, they realize that it's not guarded and um, there's nobody at the gates waiting to come in. So we're instantly supposed to feel like something's wrong. And when they go into the hotel, Daniel wants to know where Ophelia is, but Strand won't tell her where he is. Won't tell him where he is. I'm sorry. So he goes to ring the bell that's at the manager's desk, and this when he rings the bell, this forces Strand to convince where Ophelia really is, how she just took off, and then Daniel leaves Strand to die because the herd of the infected come over to kill Strand. He says, "Try to get yourself out of this one," and um he steals his car, and Strand ends up having to fend for himself. And then we're supposed to kind of wonder what's going to happen with that. But I quite liked the storyline that they did, and it really intrigues me to see what's going to happen with this. So I liked it. We'll get an up. Um, and then pretty much we're just going to talk about everything that took place back at back at the Broke Jaw Ranch because that was kind of the main storyline. Um, the episode actually opened up with this couple, Russell um, and Martha Brown, who have like um, a bone um, a bone um, out on the well, we saw it in episode 3, who have just a bone just by itself. Um yeah. So they have pretty much just a bone that's just off the ranch. And he wakes up in the night and sees that his wife and this is I forgot to mention who this was. Russell wakes up in the middle of the night and sees that his wife Martha has turned in the middle of the night, but she can't bite him because he doesn't have she doesn't have her dentures in, and I don't know why she didn't just the infected didn't just scratch him, but he slow dances with her one last time, and he takes a gun and shoots himself, and this causes them to fall over, and he lit a candle in the middle of the night, and the candle falls over, and the lantern, and it burns the bone down, and I quite like this opening scene. I thought it really did a good job of setting the tone throughout the rest of the night. So what ends up happening is this wakes up everybody in the town throughout the middle of the night. They're trying to use up the water to put out the fire, but Jeremiah says that nobody that's not worth using up valuable resources because um, you know, because there's no chance that those people survived. What I liked about this scene though was there was a child that was there, and her mom was all upset about this, but she wasn't that upset about it. So that's kind of symbolic to the zombie apocalypse world that um, this is just kind of a normal, typical, everyday thing to her. While in the meantime, um, this mother hasn't been around this type of stuff. So I thought that was kind of a cool scene right there. Um, and then later on, everybody kind of did their own thing with their own storyline. So I'll just talk about each one of them separately. Madison leaves with Troy, Blake, and the rest of their men to go take out the person that shot the helicopter, and um, she says bye to Alicia and Nick, and they don't really, well, we see her throughout the rest of the episode, but they don't see much of each other throughout the rest of this episode. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So I'll just talk about Nick's storyline first, just because um, I feel like it. So what ends up happening is Nick's kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place. He doesn't really know what he wants to do. If he wants to stay at Brokejaw Ranch with his family, or if he wants to leave with Luciana. And he he's fixing up the bone with Jemiah. Him and Jemiah start bonding. Jemiah kind of gives us a little bit of a backstory with the Brown family. We find out that they knew each other and kind of the house they lived in. How this was his original house um, before he had to build a second one for his second wife, and I did like that. And he ended up letting the Brown family stay there. And he talked about how Russell was there for him when he was at his darkest times. And what I liked about this was he points out this gun and talks about how it's just a tool, and they kind of start to talk about Troy. But Jeremiah asks, "Who is Nick in this life? What does he want? Does he want to stay here with the community, or does he want to leave with his girlfriend?" He has to make that decision, and he um, relates the story by talking about um, how when Troy was a kid, um, and he did something bad. His mother locked him in the basement, and they didn't know about it for a day or so because they used to be such alcoholics, and that wasn't even enough for him to stop drinking alcohol. What ended up having him stop drinking was he got drunk and went out and shot deer and almost shot his dick off, essentially because which I thought was a funny line, but pretty much the message there was that um he had to stop himself from drinking alcohol. So it tied into Nick's storyline because um, Nick had to make a decision about what he wanted to do in the zombie apocalypse. Did he want to stay, or did he want to leave with his girlfriend? And he tries to get Luciana comfortable in this community. Um, he ends up building a bone with and is gonna make the Browns' old home their home. And he even tells the story about how they ended up meeting, how Russell was um was fighting in a war and ended up getting hurt, and um, Martha was a nurse, and she ended up nursing him back to health. And then when he left the service, he said he was going to marry her one day, and she said, "I know that." So that was supposed to tie in, and Luciano acted like she was going to say something, but then she decided not to say anything. And then we found out that Luciano ended up leaving him in the night and wrote him a letter. And obviously, when Jeremiah comes up, Nick's all sad and he puts his gun down, and you can kind of see that that's a tie-in. So I kind of thought that was a nice little storyline they kind of um, did in this episode. I thought it was actually pretty good, and I actually really liked it. And then you had everything that took place with Alicia and Jake. Pretty much, um, they ended up being in a relationship, which I thought was obvious, which they had been building to um, throughout this episode and throughout this series. Um, but the main thing that they talked about was Jake's really likes poetry and really likes reading, and Alicia talks about how before the zombie apocalypse went to hell, she had a plan about what she wanted to do with her life, and this kind of messed up her plan because she's not going to be as successful as she thought he was because there's no world. So after they have sex, um, he she finds one of some of his books, and he offers for her to borrow one, and it was called the title of this episode, "Burning in Water, Drowning in Flame." But Alicia doesn't see a point of reading it um, because the world's ended pretty much, and there's no point of getting invested in poetry if no one's going to write anything new, and if we're just going to be um, struggling to survive. And later on, Jake takes her from a room, house, apartment, whatever you want to call it, and says that that shouldn't be the mindset of this world because my father and my brother think in this mindset, and that's just going to lead them to hell. There has to be something more. Um, and that's kind of um, was the storyline pretty much. I don't really need to go into more detail about that. And Alicia ends up jumping off like this um, cliff that wasn't very high into the water, which I thought wasn't a nice ending, I guess. But I liked it. Um, I liked it. Just kind of shows one of those problems you have when you live in the zombie apocalypse world. But then we got to talk about what went down with Madison. One of the guys doesn't think that Madison's going to survive in this world. Um, well, I shouldn't say that. That she's going to survive this trip because she's never been in the military or anything, and Madison's just kind of like, I've been taking care of myself just fine before I got to this community. So what ends up happening is they end up driving out, and they see a herd of the infected that's just chained up that they want to take care of. So they go and take care of them. They kill them. Troy, you could just see how messed up he is because he ended up chopping one of the infected's all four limbs off and stabbing it right through the head. Madison almost gets taken down, but is able to fight off the infected, and the person that said that Madison wasn't going to survive takes back what he said, and they did this all in a minute, which didn't feel like a minute when you watched it, but that's because it was in slow motion and stuff like that. And they go to find the helicopter, but we found out that they dragged the helicopter away, and um, Madison still wants to find whoever killed Travis. Um, and they find this place, um, and they are searching for everybody, and then we find out that there's this guy that um has been like shot through the head, and you can see his brain, and um he just really isn't mentally with it, and he's being eaten by a crow. And Madison puts him down, and they go to leave, and they say we should get out. Madison's like, we should get out of here. And we meet a new character. His name is, I have no clue how to say his last name, so I'm gonna well, his first name I know how to say. His last name's Walker, but his first name is Quotauka. Um, Quotauka. I'm just gonna call him Walker though until they actually say his name. And we find out that he shot down the place because he's Indian and he claims that Jeremiah stole his land um, because um, Christopher Columbus stole the Indians' land originally. So he wants to take what's already his. So he threatens an invasion um, to Broke Jaw Ranch. I'm sorry, and he gives them time to go back on foot to um, warn everybody, but they have to give up all their supplies and even their shoes. And Troy wants to keep going on the best they can, but the men are just weakened. And I kind of like this altercation that Madison and Troy had with each other, where Madison was calling out Troy for all his weaknesses, talking about how his mom didn't never loved him, saying that you know that even before the zombie apocalypse went to hell, and even after she died, and talking about how you know, to be a good leader, you have to know when to stop. So eventually they do stop. And in the middle of the night, Troy's about to kill Madison, but Madison begs for life, and Troy ends up not killing Madison, and it shows them walking, um, at the end of the night. But I thought this scene was really good. I thought the storyline was really good as well. I thought this episode actually was really good. This episode, season three's been really like a much watch for this show. Um, it just seems like you can't really miss an episode so far, and I really enjoy it so far. Um, if I had to rate this episode, I'm gonna give it a B. Not quite a B plus, but I still think it's a really good episode. I'm gonna give it a B. It's definitely more of an episode that's setting up a future storyline. We got the introduction of a new villain in Walker, so I'm actually excited to see what happens with that, and I'm excited to see what happens just overall. So I'm gonna give this episode a B, but leave you guys your thoughts in the comments of what you thought of this episode. Please make sure you guys like, comment, and share this video for more content. Make sure you guys subscribe to this channel for more content and click on the bell. So that way every time I upload a video, you guys will get the notifications for it. Make sure you guys do the same thing for my CM Brothers YouTube channel. That's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.